We have King Herod on one side, which is widely known as the bad guy. If you have kings or kids and you're telling this story, you're like, King Herod, he's not that good of a guy. And then you have the other side, which your Bible probably translates as wise men, but they were called Magi. And one day, while he's just living his high life in Jerusalem, dictating everything, being given everything provided as his people suffered, these group of men called Magi came from a far land claiming, hey, we have come to worship the King of the Jews. And it's really important of these two themes of people because these two people run from the beginning of the Bible all the way to the end of the Bible, which is one side who runs their life on fear because they do not believe anything God says, and you have the other ones who are searching for something, and at the end they find joy. See, the Magi are not a group of people that we talk about very often, is it? We kind of skip over them. We see them as the wise men. We're like, okay, these are good people. We know the story, but we don't study them very often. But they're a key factor in the story and the avenue at which God designed salvation to come. See, the Magi in this story were not from this area. In fact, they traveled from a very far distance. Most scholars say they came from the Persia, Babylonian area, which is like the far east away from Jerusalem. The Magi were officially considered people who looked and taught other people to worship and look to beggarly things rather than the created God whose laws we go by for guidance. See, they looked for their own calculations and they called it wisdom. They used things like mental creations, things that we would call like the zodiac symbols, to deliver all the meanings of life to the people. So when we read that they saw a star, and this star depicted a king that was coming, this would have indicated to them, the masters of stars, that something big was happening, and because of their religion, they naturally followed that. And if we pause the story just there for a moment, it's really interesting to see the case study between these two types of people. What we've found by both of these is they're both sinners. They're both very alienated from God. One came from a far distant land, and one was right in the backyard of the Messiah, but both heard the invitation. When Bethlehem was read to them by the scribes, whenever they heard that in the hearing, it was God's invitation to both Herod and the Magi to go and see the Messiah. But as we know, only one went. Before anything, God chose both the Magi and the Jewish king. He chose both. The hard part, the searching for the unknown that everybody was doing, was all done for them when it came to this star. In this moment, God wasn't sitting back and he sent Jesus down to this earth. He wasn't just hoping that all these people just stumbled upon Jesus and just realized it over time. No, God sent them directly and pointed them directly to the Immanuel. God created both of these beloved people to visit and worship that God. King Herod, he chooses to enter into the darkness. Instead of taking that 1.5-hour hike from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, to see the king for himself that the scribes talked about, he chooses power over worship.